the research that you did on romantic breakups,
Mm.
because
Hmm.
I thought that that article was really insightful, and I had only heard kind of about that in one other setting, and I don't think I would have heard about it if I wasn't in the field of psychology. Um, so like the idea of like content valence, and then like positive and negative emotion. I guess could you just share a little bit about what your research was in that
Yeah, and
topic?
this is honestly probably like my favorite study that I've done. I was just talking about this with someone this week. I might go back to it one day if I could fit it. My tenure committee won't think that I have 16,000 different areas, but so the basic idea. So there's not a ton of research on romantic relationship breakups, considering how common that they are. And at the beginning of grad school, I was reading some of this literature, and there were some studies that might look at, okay, what's the extent that someone's ruminating about a breakup or about the ex relationship, and they found that really ex relationship rumination was linked with breakup distress, depression, other lack of closure, things like that. And in the conclusions of the paper, they would say that, okay, so because of this, and a clinical implication is to help people think less about how hurt they are and less about the pain in the breakup. And I was reading that and I'm like, wait a second, my experience of breakups personally and with my friends is part of the pain is that it's difficult to let go of the positive memories of the ex relationship. And so so I did some more digging in and I looked at different fields, including ones that were doing like fMRI research, and studies have shown that there's a drug addiction, kind of neurological, I'm like blank on the word, but neurologically things play out like a drug addiction. So when you're in love and we think about how much we love our partner, our brain, the ventral tegmental area, the reward center of the brain gets like a huge hit of dopamine. So it's pretty much like you're on coke. And then those going through drug withdrawal, or going through a breakup, the brain, that part looks like when you're going through drug withdrawal. And so keeping that, and then there's also research that shows that when we think of a memory, especially ones with so you're talking about the content valence, like the extent to which emotion is prevalent in the memory, the stronger the emotions attached to it. When we sit in that memory, we re-experience it, and our brains light up in the same ways as if we were experiencing that in real time. So thinking about it from this addiction perspective, if you're withdrawing from a drug, you need to not inject that drug or snort that drug or whatever the different ways the kids these days, I don't know. That if you connect with the positive memories and those memories kind of give you that cocaine, that love drug, then that's going to interfere with your withdrawal process and you're moving on. And so in my view, the positive thoughts would actually be hindering, whereas normally we're told that thinking of positive things is good. But this seemed to be an instance where, well, maybe that's not the case. And so connecting it to this is actually where my passion for measurement came from, because I went to my advisor with this idea and he said, well, one way we could test this is through measurement, because we can come up with a measure, come up with items for these positive memory subscale, negative memory subscale, have participants respond and use factor analysis and other analyses to see, are they actually operating distinctly and how do they relate to different constructs. And so what we found was that thinking of positive thoughts and memories from your ex relationship and the negative memories, they are different constructs, they function differently. So it's not just thinking about ex relationship measure, but these are two subscales. They're highly correlated because when you go through a breakup, you're just thinking about your ex like all the time. And then when we looked at relationships with different constructs, what we found was that they both were linked to the negative aspects like breakup distress or negative adjustment or lack of closure. But when we put them together in a regression and controlled for their shared variance, we found that the positive memories were linked to or negatively associated with some of the moving on constructs, whereas the negative memories actually were linked to greater moving on. And so that kind of presents an example of where there's an exception to what positive memories can serve. And I think eventually when there's closure, then that's different. And I would love if I go back to that work. Now I can think about a positive memory with my ex from high school, and that's a warm memory. Whereas after he and I broke up, I would not have, wanted to have thought about that, and would have brought up a lot of pain. But when you don't have that closure, yeah. And so that is an example of whether or not you can hold both. They both exist. And so learning, and really learning to let there be space for, okay, so back to, yeah, Nick, what you were saying, that something could remind us of an ex and could be a positive memory, but that doesn't mean that we have to be with them. And sitting with also the parts of the relationship that weren't so great, like those both could coexist. They could have been great. And I think that's what makes moving on from breakup so difficult. And I even think of, I have a partner now, and I went through, like, I had my heart broken a year ago, and recently something reminded me of this person, um and I found myself missing them, even though I'm so happy to be with my partner. It's just like a memory came up, and it's like, oh yeah. And then also other memories came up, and I'm like, okay, that's why I'm glad that I'm not with this person. And so I think that actually I hadn't thought about that, Nick, of the holding both those pieces, but I think that's so important to when you're going through a romantic breakup, and that could be one of the hardest times to really exercise that skill.